I've left that. I know I don't look old enough to be a papa, but I am, and I thoroughly enjoy that. And you have just become the icing on the cake because I get to spend this evening with you. I appreciate that very much. So we're going to be talking about Hadassah this evening, right? Hadassah. Hadassah. That's Esther's Jewish name. The Esther that we read about, that's really the Persian name that was given to her. Because the Babylonian captivity has already taken place. We remember that. Nebuchadnezzar carried off the Jewish people into Babylon. And then the Persians come in and they overthrow the Babylonians. And when we look at Mordecai, who is Esther's uncle, we're talking about 3 generations already in Babylonian captivity. So there is some assimilation that's taken place. And a part of that, they've taken some Persian names, at least Esther has. So I just want us to remember Hadassah. She would want us to know that. That would be her Jewish name. We're going to be looking at selflessness. And I'm really looking to hear from you, okay? I'm really a kind guy, and I don't bite anybody or anything. But I really want to hear from you, okay? You don't want to hear me lecture. In Philippians chapter 2, we usually know verse 5, right? Having the mind of Christ. What does it say in verse 4? Someone read that for us. Philippians 2, verse 4. Thank you. Let's not look for our own interests. In fact, when we look at the Greek language there, the let means it's continuous. Let's just not do that. And anytime it comes to mind where we're just focused on our own interests, let's move away from that. Let's consider the interests of other people. Now, in the context, it's talking about Jesus, right? I thought it was all about Jesus. He's the center of our universe, right? And in the New Testament, we're to be conformed to the image of Jesus, and everything that we do is to be to the glory of God through Jesus Christ. But in that context, it's really saying when Jesus came, it wasn't all about him. Well, yeah, it was all about him. But the all about him was for us. And in the context, he died for us. He considered what was in our best interest. You know, he could have called all those legions of angels down to protect him, but he didn't do that. So that's really what he's talking about. So we're going to be looking at Esther, okay? And I don't have time to read the book of Esther. I know you are great Bible students. You've read it a number of times over the years. So we're going to be referencing it along the way, okay? But what I want us to look at is the self in selflessness. So it's one thing to say, you know, we're to be selfless and we're really to consider other people. But what creates that? How many parents do we have in here? Rearing right now children. So we got parents? Some? How many grandparents do we have? Got that too. Okay. What do we want from our children? What do we want from our grandchildren? What kind of lives do we want them to live? Christian life. Now, what's that all about? What does that entail?
It's beginning the way the parents teach us.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to be considering. Because it's easy to step into the book of Esther and say, Esther lived that kind of life. Selfless life. In fact, you remember the story there, right? We have Vashti. She is the queen. And Ahasuerus is probably Xerxes at that time. Ahasuerus is the king. He has this banquet going on. really what's happening, it doesn't tell this, he suppressed the Egyptians. They had a little uprising there. He goes down there. He suppresses them. He gets them back in order. He comes back. He's really celebrating this because there's another enemy he has to take care of. And that's the Greeks. And they're difficult. Because his father didn't do all that well with them. Darius, in fact, they defeated Darius. He had to come back home and try to get things straightened out. Well, his son, Ahasuerus, knows, I'm going to take care of those folks. So what he's doing is he's coming back from Egypt. He's celebrating that victory, and he's trying to get everybody on his side because we're going to go to Greece. We're going to fight those folks and defeat them. So he has this party going on, celebrating. Remember for how many days? 180. That's a long time, isn't it? Exactly. So he's got all these princes and noble people from the different provinces. And then he has 7 days where it's just kind of outside on the porch, if you will, just for the common folks, because he's trying to get everybody on board. So he calls for his wife, Vashti, to come and do what? Remember that? To celebrate with him and to display her beauty before all of these guys. Okay. It is believed by some, and what his request is, that she come with her crown on. And it doesn't say anything else about a wardrobe. It is believed by some, and I'm not going to go too far with this, that he really wanted her to come with just that on, okay, and display her full beauty. Don't know for sure. But whatever it was degrading to her. And she's not going to do it. And she will not. So at that time, that was a big no-no. You don't do that, especially the king. If he requests you to come, you do that. So she doesn't. Well, now, what do, right? Just a side note, okay? Vashti, from what the Jewish historians have kind of put together, she wasn't all that nice. She was pretty mean, okay? In fact, her husband, Ahasuerus, has an affair with her daughter-in-law, and she's furious. But she doesn't take it out on the daughter-in-law. That was a part of the affair. She goes after the daughter-in-law's mother and has her tortured, and it's just brutal how she was treated and killed. Okay? So she's pretty ruthless, okay? So that's going on, and that's probably a part of the backdrop of what's going on here, okay? Probably not a whole lot of love lost here with Vashti, because the counselors to the king, they come in and say, we're really concerned about this, because if the other women in your kingdom find out about this, they may want their independence, right? So we need to suppress this right now. And so what do they do? What's their advice? Make it be known. She's no longer going to be queen. In fact, when the Persians wrote a decree, it couldn't be changed. Okay, it's said in law, you do not deviate from it. So they get the king to put in a law that she is no longer your queen. In fact, there's a divorce that takes place. Just a side note, okay? They had some children. One of them was Artaxerxes. He's going to be the king before too long, when his father dies. Okay. So she's out of the way. Now, here's the kind of man that Artaxerxes is. He goes off to battle. Remember, he was going up there, he's going to whip those Greeks? He doesn't do it. He's kind of like his dad. He gets whipped. He comes back home. He's sulking. He doesn't know what to do with himself, and now his wife is gone. So they come up with this plan. We don't want you to be lonely or anything. I'm paraphrasing some, right? I'm really staying close to the text. You're lonely. Here's what let's do. Let's go throughout the kingdom and let's bring all these virgins in so that you can pick out of them who's going to be your wife, your next queen. Josephus, Jewish historian, says probably about 400 virgins are brought there. Okay. Now, we'll get to a little bit more of that in a second. Okay. They spend a year getting all primed up. I don't think it takes a year, okay? I think it's a little overkill, don't you think? Got 6 months of this oil, and then you've got another 6 months of really getting ready, all like that. And here's how ungodly it is, okay? I'm just going to be straight with you. How ungodly it is. It's just one virgin goes, spends the night with him, and then goes and joins the harem. Next night, whatever, okay? That's sad, isn't it? That's sad. And for some of them, that's it. I mean, they become his concubines. They will know no other life than to live in the harem and do whatever menial work is to be done. That's sad. Okay? But here is Esther. Now, Esther finds favor. She's a beautiful woman. Notice something, and I don't want us to overlook this because I think it was more than just beauty. I think there was that. In fact, Vashti was beautiful, and her name means beautiful. But we find something interesting. If you're in Esther chapter 2, would you notice with me in verse 7? And Mordecai had brought up Hadashah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother because they've gotten killed. She's kind of an orphan. But Mordecai will take her in as his own daughter. And the young woman was, what does your text say? Beautiful figure? Lovely to look at. Right. Mine says lovely and beautiful. It really means that she was beautiful and good. So I think it takes us from, there's this outward beauty. We see that, right? Okay. But I think the good is within her. And I think it's making a contrast. Vashti was beautiful and what I've already told you about Vashti. And cruel, bad, right? Here's the contrast to that. And the king sees that and immediately, she's my wife. She's going to be queen. Because I think he saw more than just the beauty. There was that. She's a good person. Haven't we noted that sometimes in folks? Outwardly they may be handsome and beautiful. I'm like, I just don't know I want to spend much time with that person, right? Somebody protect me here. This is not good. Well, it's the opposite here. Okay? Now, eventually it leads on to, we've got Haman. Haman's a bad guy, right? His self-interest is about him, and he's wanting to praise, and Ahasuerus will promote him, and he loves that. He goes on, he tells everybody about it. I mean, he's loving his world right now. But there's Mordecai. The king has said, now, with Haman, everybody bow down to it. Guess what Mordecai does? Not going to happen. There's a long history here. I'll just give you the brief of it. It seems as though with Haman, he's an Agagite, which would come from the Amalekites. And if you remember the history, the Amalekites and the Jewish people just didn't get along, and that goes way back to the Exodus. And then remember when King Saul was to kill the Amalekites? How well did he do with that? Not good, right? As Samuel comes in, what's all this noise I hear? Okay? It's because they're still alive. And King Agag is still alive. Agag. King Agag is killed by Samuel. It seems as though that Haman is a descendant of that. And he hears about Mordecai being a Jew, and he's not bowing down to me. And it goes all the way back to what happened with our ancestors. So he gets this in mind, being encouraged by his family and friends. What you need to do is just get rid of those folks. And he gets that in mind. Okay? The decree is signed where all of the Jewish people are going to be killed, annihilated, using that language. Okay? Yet would also include Mordecai and Esther. Now he's okay with Mordecai because he's going to get this idea of let's build a gallows, hang him on it. And about the time that he goes in to express this to the king has a sleepless night. And they bring in the Chronicles of the King, all that he has done. It's almost like, if you will, you can't sleep and somebody reads the phone book to you, okay? It almost seems like that's what's going to go on. So he's there, you're going to read the phone book to him, read it. And he reads about Mordecai intervening and saving his life. Because there's two eunuchs, they're planning to kill him. Mordecai hears about that. He tells Esther, tell the king. They're taken away. But nothing happens to Mordecai. He isn't rewarded or anything, but the king reads this about him. What has been done for him? Nothing. Well, who's that out there in the foyer, if you will? Well, that's Haman. Tell him to come in here. And he goes through this. What should I do to the man that I really want to reward? And this self-centered Haman thinks, he's talking about me. He wants to reward me. He's already promoted me. Now he wants to show this favor to. Give him a robe that you've worn. Okay, put that on him. Get him a horse that you've ridden on. And probably put some kind of thing on his forehead that will let people know this is a man who is honored by the king. Great idea. Ahasuerus says, do that for who? Mordecai. Wait a minute, I thought that was for me. No. Can you imagine how he felt? Well, he goes back home and he's crying about it, and they realize, wait a minute, you wanted to kill Mordecai? If he is truly a Jew, it's not going to be well for you. In other words, they're saying, you're going to die. And in fact, that's what happens, right? Because Esther's going to throw a couple banquets, if you will, dinners, if you will, for her husband, Ahasuerus, and Haman. First one, what do you want? Ahasuerus says, I'll give you up to half of my kingdom. Well, first of all, I want you to come back for lunch tomorrow. Okay. They come back, and then Esther makes it known. What do you want? Well, first of all, she's going to, I just don't understand why you're having me killed and all of my people. And Ahasuerus is kind of like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Who would do such a thing? That wicked Haman is doing it. Okay. He is beside himself. Now, remind me to take a side in just a moment to say something about Ahasuerus and his anger issues, okay? Remind me if I forget that. He is beside himself. I think his anger is getting the best of us. He has to go out in the garden for a little bit. He comes back in. In the meantime, Haman has fallen down on Esther's couch begging for his life. The king steps in and he sees Haman stretched across the couch where his wife is, and what's he thinking? Yeah, my wife, the queen, while I am here? And someone says, there's a gallows out there, 75 feet tall. And they don't say anything more than that. He said, put him on. Now, let me say something about the gallows. It probably wasn't one where they had a hangman's noose. You know what I'm talking about, old westerns. If you look at your text, sometimes it'll tell you it's like a tree. And what they did was, it was like a pole pointed at the top, and they would just impale you on it. That was their version of gallows. So that's where Haman ends up. But now, it's like, what are we going to do about our people? Well, Mordecai earlier tells Esther, here's the plot. They're going to kill all of us. If you don't do something, we're going to die. And she says, how can I do anything? Because a person cannot just walk into the king and make his presence known, or she make her presence known, because there's already a decree that says somebody that does that, immediately, what's the punishment? Death. Unless he holds out his scepter, which says, I give you permission. And I want us to notice something. And it's a beautiful way of expressing it. If you want to follow, it's in chapter 4 and verse 14. Now, while you're turning there, let me share with you probably a tidbit you already know it. Esther is one of those books that the name of God is never mentioned. It's not even mentioned that anybody's praying to God. It's a book about providence. It's a book I think is very meaningful, or should be, to us. Because what has happened to the children of Israel? I've already given it away. What's happened to them?
They've been abducted, taken to Babylon.
Exactly. And it's as though God has abandoned them, right? Because he's no more actively involved in their lives like before, like their history, right? Well, where is God? I think the book of Esther tells them he's still here. He's still working behind the scenes. He's in the shadows. He's still there. He's still working. He's still taking care of you. Even though you've left him, he hasn't left you. You ever felt that way? It's like, where's God? I don't see his activity anywhere. The book of Esther, he's still here. He's working in the shadows still for his people. Now, you're there in chapter 4. Read with me in verse 14. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. You know where I think he's talking about another place? It'll come from God. He may not use you, but he's still going to protect his people. Why do we know he's going to protect the Jewish people, that they're all not going to be annihilated? It's his promise.
Will not be.
Right.
As much as they turned away from God and forsaken him, he will always, when he come back, he said, because of the promises that I have made, he said to thy servant David,
Mm-hmm.
others I will not annihilate you.
Exactly.
All of them.
Right. Exactly. Because there's one person that must come from the Jewish nation to deliver all people from sin. Genesis chapter 12 and verse 3, the descendant of Abraham. 2 Samuel chapter 7 verse 12, one who will sit on David's throne and rule over all the world. It's Jesus. So Mordecai, a Jewish person familiar with the law of Moses and the prophecies, he realizes all of the Jewish people are not going to be annihilated. but you and your father's house will perish. You may die, because she's from the tribe of Benjamin. Not from the tribe of Judah, because the Christ will come from the tribe of Judah. Yet, who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Isn't that a powerful statement? What if we read that to ourselves? Who knows whether we're here for a given purpose or not? That God is using us for a specific purpose that we just haven't been able to wrap our heads around at this point. I think He uses us this way. So He's trying to get her to come on board. She does. This is where her courage comes in. Her selflessness, because she does go into the king uninvited. In fact, he hasn't had anything to do with her for 30 days. It's like, I don't know if he loves me anymore or not. She goes in. She's willing to be sacrificed for her people. And ultimately, a new decree is signed. He can't do away with the other one about the Jews being annihilated. It's there, it's written, can't be changed. But he allows a new decree to be signed, and that is they can protect themselves. And they do so. They killed 500, they killed 300, they killed 75,000. They're protected. And that's where Purim comes from, okay? Which has this lot, and that goes back to casting lots, because Haman was looking for a time of, when do we do this? When are we going to annihilate the Jews? Give me a day. So they kind of cast the, whatever they're doing there, the dice, whatever, and they come up with a date. Well, that's the day that the Jewish people get to protect themselves. That's the story, okay? I want us to take from that story and make personal application in our own lives. How can we be selfless people? Let me ask you, first of all, what does it mean in your world to be selfless? What does it mean to you? And I'm not looking for a Webster dictionary definition. I'm looking for you. What does it mean to you?
Not really worried about anybody else. When you're being selfish, concerned about yourself.
Right. Like Haman. Much like Ahasuerus, right? But to be selfless is, I consider other people. I don't forget myself. I am important in God's plan. But at the same time, I'll sacrifice self for you. That almost sounds like agape love, doesn't it? Isn't that what agape love is? A sacrificial love, wanting the best for others. And I'll even make a personal sacrifice on my part. You know where I think that begins? Is with people who are around us. Now, somebody mentioned earlier about being grandparents and all like that. We want to set the example for our grandchildren, don't we? We want to set the example for our children. As children are growing up, they are influenced by their environment beyond what we can comprehend. And sometimes it's like, the environment has nothing to do with it. Yeah, it does. It has a lot to do with it. Because children are going to see what mom and dad are doing. For a number of years, I've been a mental health counselor in West Virginia. And a lot of times, parents are bringing their children in like, I can't control them. They're just out. What can I do? And I'm wanting to say, you need to change. Because they're doing exactly what you're doing. And you're wanting your children to change, but you want to live the way you're living, such a chaotic life. Selflessness begins in the home. It begins with individuals setting the example. Who was Esther's example? Mordecai. Because we see in him a good guy. He's concerned about the Jewish people, isn't he? Yes. He's concerned about everything that's going on. But there's something else that plays a part in that, and that is personality. Who am I as a person? How do I present myself? You know, I can choose to be selfish, that the world really revolves around me, or I can choose to be selfless. I can choose to follow those good examples around me and choose to live differently. We noted earlier, in a sense, Esther's personality. She's a beautiful woman, but she doesn't think the world just revolves around her beauty. There's something about her. When all of these eunuchs are there to support her and they get all these other women there to take care of Esther, do you remember what the text says that they thought about her? They like her. They just enjoyed being there and going out of their way to make sure that she was cared for. You do that because of a person's personality. You just enjoy being around that person. And I think that's the kind of person that she was. And then life has its problems. And when we look at the problems, it has so much to do with how we evaluate our problems. Now, just imagine, what time am I supposed to shut up here?
No.
Somebody give me a time out when I get that time, huh?
7:30.
7:30? Okay, I gotta get going, don't I? A little bit longer. It has some, now just think for a moment. We have our problems, right? Now, if I approach my problems as though they're all about me, and how can I fix this problem so that it is in my best interest? I don't care about you, how it's going to affect you or you. It's all about me. Does that not create a very selfish, self-centered person? Yeah. Sometimes in families, they function that way. It's like, here's a problem in the family. Well, I'm going to fix it so I'm going to be taken care of. It's in my best interest. When we do that, a lot of times parents suffer, grandparents suffer, siblings suffer because of the decisions that are made about the problem, rather than taking a step back and saying, how can we resolve this problem that will consider everyone's best interest, right? Another thing has to do with how we prioritize things, right? If I prioritize everything based on what I think and what I feel, it's all going to be about me. Okay. And we have to prioritize things in life according to their importance. But if it's all about what I think and what I want and what I need, I probably leave you out. I become more self-centered that way. But there's something else, and that is power. Have you seen people in high positions that have some power, and sometimes a little power is a dangerous thing, you know what I'm saying? That they get some power and it becomes all about them, right? They're just barking out commands or ordering everybody else to do this and do that. That's very self-centered, isn't it? You know, I don't want to work with folks that way. I'm no longer practicing mental health for that reason, because the person I work for tried to do like this, and I said, that's not going to happen. I don't need this position. I'm here because I want to be here to help people, but I'm not going to function that way, and I just quit. God blessed me in such a way I can do that. I know a lot of people can't. But it comes back to, that was a very self-centered approach that person tried to make in my life. And that's not going to work with me. I don't treat people that way. I'm not going to be treated that way. We think about Esther, it wasn't that. She had power, didn't she? She was queen. But she used that power to protect her another thing is purpose. What's the purpose? There's a purpose, a reason behind everything that we do, whether we realize it or not. Okay? So I've got to think about, what's my purpose? What do I want to accomplish here? Because if the end is all about me, and man, when it's all said and done, at the expense of other people, I'm going to be happy. That's going to be on top of the world. I got to reevaluate those decisions and who I am. Now, here's a question to think about. For us, what is our purpose above everything? Why are we here? What is our purpose in life?
To glorify God.
To glorify God. That's it. That is it. Our mission, sometimes we get confused, okay? Sometimes we look at our mission. Our mission is to evangelize. No, it isn't. It's not really. Our mission, our purpose statement is to bring glory to God through, here's our work, through evangelism, through edification, through benevolence. And the end result is that we might be conformed to the image of Jesus. If I forget my purpose statement, if I forget my purpose, guess what? I'm going to step in because I want a purpose. It'll be me. So my purpose statement is to bring glory to Alan. That's what Haman wanted. Everybody look at me, how wonderful I am. But we know the end result of pride, don't we? Pride leads to what? The fall. What happened to Haman? He fell. God's truthful with this. So I've got to remember, as Esther did, the purpose was to bring glory to God. It doesn't come right out and worded that way, but that's the end result, right? That the Jewish people might be saved, that ultimately the Christ might come in to deliver the world from sin. But there's something else here, and that is, I've got to remember promise. Someone mentioned that earlier. I think God has made a number of promises. Now, there are times, again, that I'm looking around and I don't see God working in my world. I don't see Him working in my life. He's there. I know He's there because of His promises. And He's going to see that His promises are fulfilled. We look at the whole of the book of Esther, and again, it takes us to that promise of the seed promise is coming through Abraham, through David, down through time. And he's going to be born of a virgin. God had promised that. Mordecai, I think he taught that to Esther. Mordecai realized that. It's going to happen whether we help God or not. God is God. He doesn't really need our help, but He wants it. He wants us to be co-workers with Him. So let's be on God's side, that we can be a part of the blessing that makes a difference in other people's lives. And another thing is, we must never forget our potential. You know, a lot of times where I see selfishness is individuals, maybe they don't think well enough of themselves. It's like, I don't see that I can accomplish anything and do. And it's almost like they take this big step forward, like they want to do everything. That they want so much control in their lives so that they can somehow set potential to do it. We don't need to do that, folks. We are God's children, right? We have been conformed to the image of Jesus. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. So my potential is God is going to work in my life to bring about glory to Him. I trust Him in that. I know I can do it. Our last point, and the lesson will be yours, is this. And this is what the book is about. It's providence. Providence isn't God working miracles. He did that in the first century. That was wonderful. It laid the foundation to where we are. But today, where we function, where we live, is God providentially working in our lives. And He is working. You believe that? He's working in our lives. He's doing wonderful things for us. If I lose sight of that, then I think, I got to do everything. Now let me share with you. This is Alan making disclosure, okay? Sometimes I struggle with that. I'm kind of a type A personality. Something needs to be done. Hey, let's take a step forward. Let's begin doing it. My father taught me, if you're going to do something, expect to do it yourself. There was some good advice in that, but not all of it, okay? Because sometimes I struggle with that, of asking people for help. And guess what? Sometimes I struggle with that even with God. It's like, okay, I can do it. Till I realize, wait a minute, this isn't going anywhere. And I've got to remember the providence of God. God is still working. And I'm just an instrument. He can do it without me. Do a whole lot better without me. But the point is, He wants to do things through us. He wants Christ to be seen in our lives. Sometimes we look at the book of Esther and it's like, we don't see God in that. In fact, when they were thinking about, do we put that book in the Bible or not? We don't see God anywhere in the book. Wait a minute. He's on every page. He's just not out on the cover as he is in a lot of the other books. He's just taking a step back. And he's like, now look for me. I'm there. And that kind of reminds us of living by faith and not by sight. And that's what it takes in the book of Esther. That's what Mordecai and Esther were doing. Living by faith, not by sight. Any closing comments, thoughts, questions?
Everyone has different levels of adaptation to stressors in their life. You might take someone who's living in a concentration camp type of experience that has an excellent adaptation to that. They're dealing with it on an excellent level, and you think, well, what could they do if they were released from this and to do other things in their life? And you might take someone else that has low psychosocial stressors in their life,
Yes.
who have extremely poor coping skills to deal with even the slightest. So many times, as opposed to saying someone is selfish or self-centered, maybe they're just trying to survive on a day-by-day basis.
Right.
And things that are happening to them in their life.
Yes, that is most definitely true. Oh, yes, thank you so much. Asher, he is a man so many times out of control. He goes into Greece, right? He gets to this body of water, more than likely a sea, to get over to Greece, and it's close enough where he gets his engineers to make this portable bridge, a floating bridge to go across. All at once, there's this terrible storm that comes up and washes it away. Ashurus is totally beside himself, and he blames it all on the engineers. Has all of them beheaded. He has all of his soldiers to take out their sword, go to the river and slash the sea, and then throw into the sea all of these shackles so he can shackle the sea so it doesn't do that anymore. He had moments of just rage. Think now just for a moment about Esther going into the king without an invitation. She didn't know what kind of person it was. And if you've ever seen anyone who really has these moments of rage, you just don't know what's going to set them off, do you? And it's like, what do I do here? Is it safe or not? That helps us again, I think, to appreciate her courage, what she was willing to do. And it also makes sense of what, when he comes through and finds out that Haman wants his wife killed, he takes a step outside, because he's probably ready to do something right then with his own hands or something. Takes a step, comes back in, takes a deep breath, but it's still, he's ready to kill Thank you so much.
Yeah, you look at it that way and think about Esther's words when she said, if I perish, I perish.
I perish.
She meant that.
Exactly. And probably in her mind, it's probably going to work out that way, you know? He's just that kind of guy. Yeah. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Really enjoyed myself.